My name is Jesse Bradley, and I'm originally from Minnesota. I went to college at Dartmouth. My degree was in psychology, but I really didn't want to become a professional counselor. I always wanted to play professional sports. I was able to play as a goalkeeper in America, Scotland, and Zimbabwe. Then, extremely sick, tragic, and it changed my career. So now I'm a pastor in Seattle. I'm married. We have 4 children and 3 boys, 1 girl. We also have a dog named Bella, and we just acquired a hamster named Kiwi. That's the latest addition to our family.
Nice. Well, Jesse and I met, I believe, through Clubhouse. This is probably my first podcast I'm doing with someone that I actually met through that new social media platform. And for those, this is not a plug for Clubhouse, but I'm loving it so far. It's authentic conversations with people. And I just live in the podcast rooms of Clubhouse. So, Jesse, it's great to finally get this chance to actually sit down sort of face to face. I'm a little nervous when I talk to someone who studied psychology because now I feel like, you're going to be, I'll be interviewing you, but you're really interviewing me through this whole thing. I can feel
Yeah,
it.
that's right. And at the end of the podcast, I'll give you 4 or 5 things about yourself you probably didn't know.
Yeah, I'll go home and, talk about all the ways that my parents screwed up my life. So, so there's a quote on your website that I love, and this really is for me sort of the gist of where I envision this conversation going. But again, like all the conversations we have in life, whether they're recorded or not, the best ones are the authentic ones that just kind of naturally evolve. So I'm going to start with this quote, just get your response to it, and we'll go from there. It says, I believe good things come out of the worst and most traumatic situations in life. And then you write after that, have you found this to be true? But before that question, so you believe that good things come out of the worst and most tragic situations and traumatic situations. Talk about why that's such an important phrase or quote for you, and some of the worst and most traumatic situations I'm sure we'll get into, but I want to talk more about the education and the learning that has come out of those.
Yeah, I would say there's 2 sides to that coin. And the first side is the trauma is real and the pain is real and the dark days are real. And I wouldn't want to belittle any of those or shrink those. And in fact, in my own journey, grieving isn't something that comes naturally. I personally, and also come from a family where we persevere, we just try to learn and improve, and we try harder. And we don't always stop and grieve or mourn, enter into some of the sadness and process that. I certainly, in my most difficult days, that was a new kind of way to cope and a new way to walk through the pain. So I just want to not quickly move into all the benefits and the redemptive side of it, but to say that part of our journey here on life is the unexpected trials that don't announce that they're coming. They're not politely knocking on our door. They're just like a storm that sometimes, for me, I was fighting for my life, or the 2 people in my life are closest to growing up, my parents, suddenly the divorce is happening. And I could share other examples, but I just want to say with compassion, I sincerely care for anyone listening today. And you might feel like you're on the brink or things are over your head, and where's the hope? And that kind of leads to the second part of it for me, which is looking back. I would say that I learned the most in life in the valleys, and it wasn't on the mountains. And also, that's where there was the most transformation in my life. And that's also really where the best things have come in my life, too. On a number of different kind of defining moments in my life, it was really at the low points where hope and that redeeming started to happen and grow. And I also want to say, for anyone today that feels like life is out of control and the future, there's a lot of uncertainty, maybe there's a lot of loss, and you're just wondering, can anything good come out of this? My answer is a very strong yes. And my life was rebuilt after it was really shattered. So that's a quick response to the quote, but I think both are real. And I think that the pieces, and I call it grace, an undeserved gift, the grace that flows out of those trials is greater than even the pain and the suffering.
So when you were in some of those darkest times in your life, it's easy, not easy, it's easier for me personally, and I hear from other people too, that once we've been through the challenge, and you alluded to that already, it's easier to look back at it and go, wow, look at what I learned. The challenge of job loss, I look back and think, wow, look at all the great things that came from the fact that I wasn't in that job anymore. By the time I got it home, we all look at COVID right now. I think that it's really hard to use the word blessing and COVID at the same time because of all the death and the job loss and the horrific things that are happening. But the family time that people are getting together, and the the meals with our spouses and the time with our kids and stuff, that's all real as well. And that's all really great. Go back to one of those trials, pick a trial. I mean, you can just go through and flip through the note cards. 7 years old, your parents are divorcing. You're a young athlete with the world in front of you. And now you've got this nearly tragic, potentially fatal disease. Talk to the person who's in it right now, and just what got you through. I mean, you're 7 when your parents were getting a divorce. I know that's young,
Right.
but still it's real. Or
Yeah.
or the fatal, near fatal disease, whatever. Talk to that individual who's in it now, who just can't see that light that we can see once we get through it.
Yeah. I would say the scariest experience was when I was in Africa and I took a prescribed medication every week to prevent malaria. And after a season of playing soccer there as a goalkeeper, my body started to shut down. All the different side effects started to kick in. And I noticed right away I had migraine headaches, and I never have headaches. I'm just one of those people that never has them. And the migraine headache so intense that any noise, any light was too much for me. And I thought, what in the world's going on? And then sweats and chills and double vision and rapid heartbeat. My heart started to beat 160 beats a minute, just sitting still. Tachycardia, atrial flutter is another abnormality, skipping beats, heart murmur, pain in the left side of my chest. And not only that, but crazy dreams. I started to have waves of depression would just hit that I've never experienced before, panic attacks. It's like a really bad drug overdose. And I was in Zimbabwe, and the doctors there didn't know what to do, but they saw my condition declining rapidly. And so they sent me home. And I came home without answers. And I came home knowing that, I'm no longer going to be playing soccer overseas. And I didn't know if I'd ever recover. And we had to pay out of pocket to go to a doctor at Stanford, who was the first one who said this could be side effects of the drug. And I knew at that point it was. Sometimes, and if you're in a situation where you really, I believe God's given you an intuition, and I had to listen to my body and pay attention to it. And the doctors all said that I should continue to take the drug for another month because I could still get malaria on top of this. But I knew inside it was the drug. And so I resisted what the doctor said. And then we had my blood sent to Center of Disease Control, and they confirmed toxic levels of the drug. And then it was really a year of fighting for my life with all those symptoms and a 10-year recovery. So this was not a situation that was going to quickly turn around. There were not a lot of answers. And it rocked me on so many levels. As an athlete, I feel like I've got control of my body. Right. As someone that's pretty emotionally kind of in equilibrium, I felt like that was gone. And I just wondered, like, am I ever going to be in my right mind again? Am I ever going to have physical health and strength again? And that's a scary spot to be in. Am I going to live? I was back in my parents' basement. I never thought I'd move in with my parents. They had a little baby monitor to check, how am I doing at night? Like, what do I need? Is there an emergency? What's going on? And that's about a most humbling spot I could have entered in with, the things I had my identity attached to were achievement, soccer, health, education, career, finances. And it felt like literally all that was just gone. And there was no way that I could just get it back on my own strength. No doctor could get it back for me. And so it was a very helpless feeling. And maybe some people are listening feel overwhelmed financially, or there's a relationship that feels out of control, or maybe it's a health situation. And a couple of things started to help me. One was starting to be thankful every day, 10 things. I literally listed them because I was so focused on what I don't have anymore that consumed me. And I had to shift and say, what do I still have? What am I thankful for? I also started to chart progress, and it's important to keep track of, I think, different areas of provision or blessings where I charted how long I could walk. And then after many months, I could look back because it felt like I wasn't making progress. And I could look back and say, no, actually, I can walk 10 more minutes than I could 4 months ago. And another thing for me that started to happen is that my coping mechanism in the past was just perseverance and strength and trying harder. But that wasn't going to get me through this. This was like an elephant too big. Where do I even start with this one? And I started to learn how to pray, and in that prayer, pour out my heart. Now, just a little bit of my spiritual journey. I didn't grow up in a Christian family. I didn't grow up reading the Bible. I didn't know about Jesus till I went to college at Dartmouth, and I took an introduction to world religions. And the professor assigned this Gospel of John and many other different texts. And the professor didn't necessarily believe in the Bible, but I read this book that was new to me. And I ended up, putting my trust in Jesus, which was pretty radical. Our family, Baskin Robbins, 31 flavors. We have some in our family are atheists, some are Jewish, rabbi, agnostic, ex-Catholic, a couple Catholic people, and just a wide range. And yet I discovered something in Jesus that just satisfied me in the deepest part of life, where I just couldn't figure out where to search in this world for that. So I realize there's a lot of listeners with different backgrounds. I just sharing my story. I think it's great if we share each other's stories or share our stories kind of freely. But all that to say, it stretched me in a spiritual way and in my soul, and in a way of releasing burdens. Instead of me trying to control it all and carry all of the pain, I was able to release some things. And that was just totally new to me. And I didn't know how to even do that, but I just knew I couldn't carry it anymore. So those are, a couple pieces for me, just charting progress, being thankful, and then learning how to kind of get rid of some of those burdens we're not intended to carry. And I just felt like I was being crushed by the trauma and the loss. And that started to give me some hope. I believe habits are transformative. Habits are life-giving. And we can always choose which habits we want in our day. And sometimes that's the place to start when something's so big. So that's a little longer answer.
No, I
Ed,
love it.
but...
I love it. I'm a very visual person. I hear words and I put a picture to it. It's a blessing in many times, but it's also very much a curse at times too. Somebody will say something and I get disgusted by it because I'm seeing it. But in this case, I'm not. I'm actually very encouraged. I like a lot of everything you said. I love, but I'm going to focus in on a couple of things that it brought up for me. I love the charting your progress part. That's huge. To be able to look back, and it's the adage you mentioned. You alluded to the elephant. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Yeah.
You can't eat the whole elephant at once. You chart your progress. I write in a gratitude journal every morning, and it starts with 3 things I'm grateful for. And sometimes it's just things I have gratitude for right now. I get to talk to Jesse today. That's one of the things I wrote this morning. Yesterday, one of the things I wrote was that my wife and I had a great vacation. We just got back from a week in Palm Springs.
Nice.
Tomorrow, it might be, a couple of days ago was my mom's birthday. She passed away 4 years ago. The whole entry was about her and gratitude for lessons I learned there. Yes. I also like the imagery of, and you didn't say this, but I thought about it. If you walk into a dark room and you just light a lighter or light a match, the room lights up.
Yeah.
So when you're in your darkest time, and this is where I get to play Jesse for a second and be the guy being interviewed.
Right.
For me, in the darkest times in my life, if I could just think about, and I can go back to one very, very dark time in my life, and I won't go there now, maybe in another conversation, recorded or not, but I was as depressed as I've ever been. And I kept thinking about all the different relationships in my life, and they made me more depressed. I felt like I was letting people down. But I thought about my brother and how great of a friendship. We're 7 years apart, but we've always been really close. I have 2 brothers, but at that particular time, the brother who's 7 years older than I am was the one who saved me. And he lived 600 or 700 miles away. But the thought of him and the happiness that I have in that relationship literally saved my life.
Wow.
And so for me, just holding on to what's the one thing that I'm so grateful for that is just the best thing in my life. So while those weren't your words, that's what I interpreted from what you said. So find the things that you're grateful for, list them out, whether it's people or things or your new hamster or your dog or whatever the case may be. So no, that's really awesome. So
yeah, I love that about your brother. Relationships are so powerful. And, if someone's really down in a pit, even hundreds of miles away, you can still reach out to them and there's an influence there. And of course, we're more connected now through Zoom and other things.
Yeah.
But I love that of your story. I'd love for you to unpack more of that sometime too.
Well, and it was before social media and texting and even cell phones. So the only time I'd talk to him is if he came into town or we called each other, and he lived in Northern California. I was and still am in Southern California.
Yeah.
I'm curious why just off track here for a second. Lots of people take, is it Lariam?
Yeah, that's right.
Malaria. Most don't react the way you did, obviously, or that drug would be no longer. Why, did you ever find out why that affected you? Why that particular drug affected you the way it did?
It's a great question. There was, for a while, Lariam Action USA, and they were gathering all the different stories, all the different people who have been affected. And there were far more people affected than I think was realized. And the drug was controversial, and it's very difficult, even sometimes when you're trying to share it with, it's a pharmaceutical company, or not everyone believes that there's a connection there. So you really have to take those steps to get your blood measured and then chart the side effects. And when you're going through a lot of trauma, I don't know, for me, I tend to be someone who just forgives freely. And, I wasn't so much that I was motivated to like really make sure there's justice here and so forth. But instead, what I've tried to do over the years is just share with people to be aware of side effects of medications, because even though if they're well-intentioned, it's still something that can be so damaging. And I think a theme out of that is the irony that sometimes what's supposed to protect you in life can actually even be killing you. Right. And I mean, sadly, there's people who have had parents, let's say, and the parent role is one of protection and provision. But if a parent is harsh and negative or abusive, it's crushing, and how do you walk through that? So for me, I would say that, it could be something with me genetically. And I've got kind of an interesting mixture in my background there. So it's hard to say the exact reason why, but I would say that overall, it's increased my awareness that when you take a medication, just keep listening to your body, talking to your physician as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting you talk about how things that are supposed to protect us and take care of us don't. And then you went to parents. I think about stories I've heard, and I know you in your role as a pastor know this as well. Can you share stories that you've heard during this COVID pandemic that we're in? I don't mean share stories that are hard, but there are a lot of hard stories out there. A lot of kids not going to school who are in bad home situations, spouses not going to work who are in bad home situations and can't get out. Give those folks some encouragement for a moment, if you could.
Yeah, definitely. Ed, when we started, you talked about, having time together as a family. I would say before COVID, our family sat down for maybe 1 or 2 meals a week. Yeah. And now, I mean, every night, it's like, that's what we do. Friday nights, we eat, we watch a movie together.
50s again, like we saw on TV. Dad comes home and everybody's having dinner together. And yeah.
Yes. It's a bonding that happens over that table when you listen to each other's stories and you ask what's going well, what's challenging. And that's something that was an unexpected blessing. I think a lot of the greatest blessings in life are kind of unexpected, and you make the best of some situations and even realize, what started to emerge in those challenges. Another one for me is there's a man who works, at a school, is part of the facilities team there. And he works 40 hours a week full time, but he saw how many people don't have food and how many people are struggling financially. And we worked together, and during COVID, brought over 8 million pounds of food. I mean, he's literally just loving his city and then gathering more people and a team, and have distributed over 8 million pounds of food during this pandemic. And I love that proactive, let's step up, find solutions. And if you have a desire to help people, there's so many resources, and it'll just start to grow and other people will join you. So I'd encourage someone who's listening. I think a lot of times the burdens that weigh on us the most, in other words, the things that we wake up thinking about, the things that we shed tears over, those are the areas of passion where we need to take a step and become part of the solution or part of the healing. And I think they're linked. That word passion, sometimes we just think of it as emotion, but really it's so devoted to a cause that you're willing to put in your time and energy and even suffer for that cause. And there's a lot of passions that run deep. And when you see a need, sometimes, that passion is going to be stirred. For me, seeing the statistics on divorce, separation, tension in marriage during COVID, we made videos and we did many videos. They're on my website, jessebradley.org is the site. We made them free, so we didn't want to monetize it, just wanted to be a resource for couples to watch those videos and then have some discussion questions and process and grow and support one another. Because when situations are challenging around us, we can either draw close to the people with us and our family, and kind of serve them and connect and unite, or we bring out our worst and we're harshest, or we're mean, or we drive away, or we take it out on the people around us. And marriages, there's a lot of division in marriage right now, that instead we want restoration. And so that's my hope, is that at home, I mean, we've got so much time at home these days. It's where you live, work, learn, and play. It seems like it's all
everything.
right there. My wife and I were working out together today in the living room, and it's like, okay, everything's at home. Our health clubs still aren't open. And so at home, make that a place where you say, what's ideal? What could be vibrant at home? What do we just kind of dream about? And COVID can't take that stuff away. So let's be intentional. And so those are some examples of some real good things that I've seen during COVID, both personally and in the area where I live here in Seattle.
Yeah, I saw a cartoon early on in all of this where the man looks at his wife, says, "Now remind me, honey, am I working at home or am I living at work?" I can't remember which it is. And the answer is yes, we are.
It's so true.
Yeah,
and we're on our phones so much. It's like one's a personal one and the next one's work
I
for a lot
know.
of people. And it's like the lines are getting blurry.
Yeah, there's no 8 to 5 anymore. I'm finding.
Yeah.
I'm doing a lot of part-time stuff to try to earn a little bit of money, extra money to buy this house and just to, stay on top of things and so forth. And it seems like, and I'm not, poor me, always working. I love it. I love work. Work is like my favorite thing to do, especially when I get to do it at home, because when I'm done here, I get to go downstairs and have a cup of coffee with my wife, or hang out with the grandkids or what have you.
That's right.
Very top of your website says strengthen your marriage in 30 days. I was going to go there later in the conversation, but because you already went there a little bit, let's just stay there for a second. You asked me before we recorded, who is the audience? And you asked me more in detail than that, not just, hey, Ed, who's your audience? But I mean, it's everybody. I mean, there's a lot of different people in a lot of different walks of life at this point. But I do know, because I've talked to some people who listen, that there are a lot of people. And I also know this, even if I didn't talk to people, because I read, and I pay attention.
That's
that
right.
More than half the people here listening today or watching today are going through a marriage or a relationship battle. And I'm not saying that because I know the names of the people. I'm saying that because I know the data.
Yeah.
And I know that that's probably very God and Jesus focused because of who you are. You're a pastor. And I know certainly a lot of just put God first and read the Bible together and pray. And those are great answers, and they are. But can you talk to that person who maybe doesn't have that in their life and how they can strengthen their marriage as well, whether it's 30 days or whatever the time frame is?
Yeah. Ed, you mentioned my parents, and for me growing up, there was a lot of tension in the household. There was fighting. It was not a household of peace. And then my parents got divorced when I was 7. And I don't know the pain personally of going through a divorce, but I know how much that affected me, how deeply, for so many years in different situations. And I know that when husband and wife are not getting along well, it is something that's one of the deepest and most painful experiences. And that includes, for husband and wife and also for the kids. And that, sometimes it's the pain that really drives us towards a desire to help people. And if you've tasted a certain pain, you know what that's like, and you just want to make a difference. And so that's been my heart. As a pastor, I'm able to bring some premarital counseling. I'm able to counsel with couples. I've seen a lot of couples say, we're done. We're going to get a divorce. But then there's a turnaround. And what are the key elements in a marriage? What are the key skills? What's the heart condition? And there's some different components. One of them is communication. Another one's conflict resolution. And then there's practical stuff like who's doing how much work. There's unspoken expectations. That's huge in marriage. In marriage, there's an emotional connection, an ability to enter in. And then also, I believe there's a spiritual part to marriage. Marriage is the most intimate relationship that we have. And it is emotional, it's relational. It's also intellectual, it's physical, and I believe it's spiritual too. And I think in the spiritual realm, there's a lot of help there. And I realize that some people are more open in that, some are less open or interested, and there's a range. But I found that, and you can look at a lot of research too, the difference prayer can make in a marriage, but also when you think about what's the foundation of the marriage. And I think the foundation is love and commitment. And sometimes we run out. And I believe that when there's another source that's greater, then, that love, that source even when I don't feel like loving someone, I can still receive love, and then I have love to give, because you can't give what you don't have.
Yeah.
And receiving is really, I believe with God, it's not like we're striving and performing and trying to check boxes and be good enough. I believe it's a relationship we first receive, and then that overflows into all of our other relationships. And so that's another piece, I think, that's important in marriage. And so that's where with the videos, we just try to cover a lot of different practical topics. And you could watch, we have 30 videos, maybe only 4 or 5 even mention God. So there's really a wide range of topics. But for a lot of people, they grew up seeing a picture of marriage in their home. And for some who saw healthy marriages, that's tremendous. I mean, what an advantage. But for a lot of people, we didn't grow up with that. And so how do you kind of learn that? And what does it look like to live that out together? So,
well, I'll tell you also, as one who grew up in a home with parents who had that terrific marriage, my mom and dad, my mom passed 4 years ago, and they were heading towards their 70th wedding anniversary. And while I would never trade my upbringing with 2 loving parents who had a great loving home for example, what you went through with your parents when you were so young, the dark lining for a minute, it's not a term we use. We always say silver lining. The dark lining for me was they made it look so easy that when I got married, I thought marriage was easy. And I didn't ever learn from anybody around me, whether there was divorce around me or not. I didn't have any I had one friend, I think, whose parents were divorced when I was a kid. And he's a great friend. I thought it was really strange that I'd come over and there's no dad around. I just was really weird. Now, unfortunately, I look at my kids and I look at my peer group, and it's almost strange. It's almost the opposite now. Wow, your parents are together. It's not quite that extreme. One thing that I, as I went through your materials a little bit and heard you talk on another YouTube or another podcast and did my research, my due diligence.
You're thorough. Yeah.
A little bit. I think, and it got me thinking about when my relationship with my wife, we're coming up on 30 years married, and we're happy. We have our issues, every marriage does, but what we do have is that we're always excited about something. There's always something to look forward to. And I think that in a new relationship, it's exciting. I get to go see her for, I haven't seen her for a few days, or him, or we're going to go away for the weekend, or we're going to go to whatever for the weekend, or we're going to do whatever on Friday night. I think what happens a lot is people get so stagnant and just don't have anything really that they're looking forward to that they can find in the bounds of the marriage. Yeah. And that's not that I'm trying to give any advice here, because that's not my role, but what works for me in my marriage and what I've seen in others is that there's always something fun and exciting to look forward to with each other.
That's great.
And because when that dies out, man, it's tough.
Right. Those shared experiences. What are those hobbies? Maybe it's exercise, maybe it's travel, but lifelong learner. And what can we do together? What are we learning? What's a calendar look like? And what are we looking forward to? I love it that you're intentional and create some of that.
We love to play golf together. We played golf together 4 times last week out in Palm Springs. And and we can't wait we're looking at the dates when we can go again. We'd have gone yesterday, but it was too windy down here.
Excellent.
But, we're always looking forward to something like that.
That's so good. Ed, I think I would add too that forgiveness is so important in marriage.
Definitely.
And even with my parents and their divorce, the most difficult person for me to forgive was my dad, because he was the one, who left and moved to another state and just wasn't around for my childhood very much. And again, going back to my faith, it wasn't until I knew I was forgiven by God, by grace, that then I was able to forgive my dad. Yeah. And when you've received forgiveness, again, you want to forgive everyone. And in marriage, if there's resentment, bitterness, it can be subtle, but it's there. If you harbor that, you go back to that, that is so damaging to a marriage. And so there's got to be a lot of grace. There's got to be a lot of forgiveness. A good marriage is 2 people who forgive each other really well.
Yeah.
And then as you're forgiven too, it's like, don't just receive that forgiveness, but say, okay, that's going to motivate me to change. I don't want to stay the same. And to go back to say, okay, what's ideal in our marriage? Because that's where there's commonalities. There might be disagreements about how we're doing some things, but the commonality is we both want a strong marriage and we both have those same virtues and values. And if you come back to those, and how do we treat each other when we first met, and sometimes we're more kind to strangers than we are to our spouse. It's like, let's come back to being civil and kind. Let's commit to being kind. Let's look at our ideals and how do we get there together? And there's a lot of restoration that can happen.
And we have 2 choices in everything. Literally in everything we face in life, we have 2 choices. We can hold on to it or we can let go of it.
Yeah.
And so we can hold on to that pain and that bitterness and, oh, I can't believe she said this, or I can't believe he does that. Or we can just let it go and
Yeah.
hold on to the things that matter the most. Man, I can't believe she actually stopped what she was doing and came up and brought me that. Or she called me in the middle of the day, in the middle of her busy time, or he took the time to stop and pick up my favorite dinner on the way home. Just
Mm-hmm.
hold on to those things and let go of the garbage that just doesn't. I mean, it matters, but it doesn't matter so much that I'm always blown away. And I was married and divorced and now been remarried for almost 30 years. So I've been through
Yep.
that.
Yep.
And I've seen it around me in my own family with siblings and so forth too.
Yeah.
But I'm always amazed that two people that can't live without each other to the point where they want to get married get to a point where they can't live with each other. And I just wonder, gosh, what happened?
Yeah.
It's a tough one.
That's right. That's right. And I think it's one of the most encouraging things when couples say, okay, we're going to stay committed to each other. Now, what do we need to apologize for? What do we need to change? What help? There's no shame in getting a counselor, Christian counselor, or any kind of counselor. It's going to be an outside person too. And it's exciting when you see couples in love and rediscovering that love. There's love and respect. Put those two together a lot of times. But that's awesome to see that.
Well, love has to come up in my podcast because my last name's Hart. So, how can it not,
Yes,
right?
That's it. That's it.
All right. So talking about a different kind of love now. We could go relationships, but I can hear the radio dials turning off as we keep talking about marriage. So let's bring it back. Not that that's a bad thing, but it's a wonderful thing. And there are times when the whole podcast will be about that. And I hope you and I can do that. Talk about soccer, talk about sports. You played 3 sports in high school growing up. You wanted to be a basketball player. You turned out to be a professional, an Ivy League champion, 2-time goalkeeper in soccer.
Mm-hmm.
Parlayed that into a career. Obviously there are lessons and there's mentality that got you there. Tell us about when I word associate the word soccer and throw that at you. Just take us where that takes us.
A love for the game. When I was 3 years old, grew up at the University of Minnesota campus, and I would go with my parents to the Golden Gophers. That was the mascot, not the toughest sounding mascot.
Yeah, exactly.
I told my parents right then, this is what I want to do when I grow up. And soccer was a sport where I had the most potential. Basketball was really my favorite sport. So to play, NBA, I'd either have to be incredibly quick or incredibly tall. And I didn't measure up there. So soccer was a sport where I knew I could keep playing, beyond college. And I was a goalkeeper. You have to be a little crazy to be a goalkeeper, and I'll own that. And it was so much fun. Sports for me were kind of an escape in some ways. Were just pure joy, and love the teammates, the games, the competition, the season, even the training. When you really love something, no one has to wake you up in the morning and say, oh, go practice that. And, don't you want to improve a little bit there? I would be all the time, whether it's the weight room or out in the field or working on my craft, working on my skills. And it's something that, I have 4 kids, and I think one of them has that around sports, but the other 3 don't. And I'm not going to push them towards that. And with sports, I still look back and the relationships, so many years later, I'm still, this morning I was sending off an email to an old coach and some teammates, and that's what continues. I forget some of the details. I don't forget all the bad goals I've let in. I try to forget those.
They motivate you. Yeah,
that's right. But those relationships are golden. And as you're going through sports, you just get to meet so many different people. Every city I've been in, I continue to play, and I'll meet people from many nations through soccer. It's just number 1 sport, so many countries, and the friendships keep growing. So there was a point though where sports became too big a part of my life. And by that, I mean, there's just a ceiling on how much time and energy you can really invest and how much satisfaction something can bring to you. And there were times where I tried to make sport even bigger than it was, and it isn't healthy. And it ended up putting a lot of pressure on me. And so it ended up when goalkeeping turns into pressure and a little bit of perfectionism, and when you're losing that joy, and I call it an idol in life, it becomes your number 1, and it shouldn't be your number 1. And then when you bring it back down to where it should be, it's like, oh, okay, this is so much better. This is what it's designed to be. So like you mentioned, you enjoy work, and I do too. And just to keep it in its proper place, but enjoy it to the full. And I definitely I enjoyed sport as long as I could play it competitively, professionally. It was incredible.
What would your life look like today if you didn't get sick when you're in Zimbabwe?
Goalkeepers can play till they're about 40. So
Mhm.
I think I would have probably had a long career. And, that's something I still kind of mourn. I feel like there's 10 years of kind of competition inside of me that just never really got to live it out.
So how
So
do you scratch that itch now? You said you still play, and it's one thing to play recreational and another to play competitive. I know because I've never been professional as an
yeah,
athlete. I was a professional baseball general manager.
yeah,
I watch the game and it's different. I love being in it every day.
that's right.
How do you scratch that itch? How do you what would you tell somebody that doesn't just for physical reasons or mental or illness or what have you, just doesn't get to do what they were passionate about anymore?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you have so much experience with sport on different levels too. I would say that some of the things I really enjoy, I still really enjoy playing for a team. I get to put on a uniform. There's a game, a schedule. We play sometimes in a big stadium. Now the stadium's empty, but in my mind,
Yeah,
it's full,
yeah,
and,
exactly.
and it's still fun to play, but it's different. And then I enjoy going on runs with my wife. And there's different ways, exercise is still fulfilling in many ways. And for my wife and I, we're raising money for kids without clean water through World Vision. And we love training that half marathon and doing that together. So I enjoy that. Sometimes I'll be able to work with athletes. And I worked, as a college pastor, worked with a lot of guys that played in the NFL or, just different situations where I'll speak to a team. At Seattle Sounders, we had a faith and family night and I was able to speak there. So different connections with athletes are great. Haven't done a lot of coaching, just a little bit, but overall, I would say that, nothing ultimately really replaces it. And that's the thing
Yeah.
about sport. It's your livelihood. It's your body. When it's gone, it's gone. But I will say being a pastor, it's more fulfilling seeing lives changed and seeing people just, whether you want to call it an abundant life or whether you want to call it just full of hope or, relationship with God. But people, there's a turnaround. And when you see that, at the end of the day, that is so fulfilling because when we win, even we win like the Ivy League championship, I mean, I've got a ring and it's fun to talk about and the stories. But at the end of the day, what matters most is what helps people the most. And I get to do something now that I get to see incredible fruit. And I'm just so glad to be a part of that.
Yeah, and we all can touch people's lives based on where we've been and what we've experienced. And I think some of a good friend of mine talks about, and he gets labeled as someone who collects relationships. And when you first hear that, you think, ooh, that sounds so kind of harsh. He collects people. But then when I
Yeah.
stop and think about the word collecting, I collect stamps or I collect baseball cards or whatever you collect, you prize those, you value those, you cherish those. And so based on that definition, I'm a relationship collector as well. Every
Mm-hmm.
relationship matters deeply to me. It's why I'm doing what I'm doing at the podcast, why I
Yeah.
work with family owned companies. And going back to your point of being in touch with an old coach, I'm still in regular communication with my old high school baseball coach. I have a
Mm-hmm.
group text with a bunch of my old high school. This was 1982 when I graduated from high
Outstanding.
school.
It's
And we're
great.
still
Yeah.
texting each other. I've got
Yeah.
guys that were on my team when I was a GM in baseball that I'm in touch with. I send them all birthday messages or happy Father's
Mm-hmm.
Day to the whole text group and everything. And
Mm-hmm.
those relationships are so important. So I think that it's important if I'm going to give advice for a second, which nobody is listening to this for my advice, but I'm going to give it anyway. And that is to just, if you can't do what you love doing anymore, find things that are close to it, that represent it. You satisfy that competitive itch
That's right.
by doing other things that maybe aren't as competitive, but they release the same endorphin. Getting up
Yeah.
on a Sunday morning to get up and give a message is
Yep.
probably more exciting to you now than playing soccer in the Ivy League championship game.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
how do you use that skill set of that mentality or that discipline to get to the Ivy League championship in your life today?
Yeah. We like your advice, by the way, Ed. Keep it
Hmm.
coming.
Oh, no, I don't
Unsolicited
know
is
about that.
fine.
I don't know.
It's great. It's great. I'd say, athletes have a mindset towards habits and towards progress, towards goals. And I think whether it's in the business world or even in faith, for me, one habit is I started reading the Bible, 30 years ago, almost 3 chapters a day. And that's just one of those habits that it grounds me. It just, there's a solid foundation there, and I try to live that out. So that is one thing. I just believe that whatever you do, you should do it with all your heart. And, with soccer, I poured everything into that. And then I was just like, well, why would I do any less in a different area? And I think, and no matter what area you're in, I think doing things with authenticity, doing things, thinking about a team. We have teams, right now. I'm so thankful for a guy named Joel who set all this up. I don't know how the speaker and microphone and computer and programs, like, I don't know it like he knows it, but I get to be part of a team. And when you're doing things with a team mindset, and you've got some goals and you're chasing after those together, I mean, it's just fun. It's fun to be on a team that, alone you can't do it, but together we're going to go further. And I enjoy what I do. I wake up every day excited, just stuff like this, conversations like this, meet new people. So
me too. Somebody asked me why I do podcasts, and this is why. Conversations like this is 100% why I do this. That
awesome.
If money comes or if whatever else comes, I don't care. I mean, it's nice to monetize it, but I mean, really at the end of the day, just genuine conversations with people, and that I get to record, and that hopefully my kids and grandkids will listen to someday. And and that would be great. All right. Word association. Great. I promised I was going to do this with you a little bit. I already did it with the word soccer.
Okay.
I'm going to throw 3 more words at you that are on your website.
Okay.
And I'm just going to say them in backwards order. This was the last one I saw, but I want to start with it. Adoption.
Wow. It is one of the most difficult things. It's not for everyone. I think adoption stories are healing stories, but at the same time, I'm so grateful we were able to adopt a boy. And also I encourage people to consider it, because there are so many kids. We don't need a foster care system if, people are willing to provide a forever home for a child. And I think some of the pain, again, the redemptive piece for me in seeing my parents no longer together, dad not there, is I so much want every child to be loved by parents. And there's a lot of kids that need some love.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I've got a story on that too, but we'll do that another day. Healing.
Healing is something that takes time, and healing is something that's far more than any kind of formula. I think it's far more than even self-help. I think the best healing comes through relationships, and it's through relationships with other people, and also a relationship with God. And I think that there's really no limits to how much healing we can receive. And especially for me, it's been in the emotional areas. It's been in the soul, those areas. Now, when it comes to physical healing, you go see a doctor. Okay. That's one area, and that's a little more straightforward, and it's medical, it's science. But then what about the emotional, the relational, the spiritual? And that's where I've experienced so much, and I want people to experience it too. I think we need a lot of healing in our land. I just look at tension. I look at things like racism, and I love it when there's reconciliation, and we love each other, and we love our neighbor, and we treat each other as equals, and we serve one another. And we need a lot of healing in our land in many levels.
Yeah. If you don't think there's people around you that need to be healed, you're not paying attention.
That's right.
And oftentimes, I have a mirror up above my computer just so I can test the lighting and so forth. And when I look in that mirror, I see the first person that needs healing.
Yes.
Every day. I mean, whether it's emotional or physical or whatever, financial, spiritual, relational.
Right.
Yes. We all need healing in all those areas, literally every single day.
Yeah. And for my life, there were 2 stories. There was what's on the outside, the success and the achievement. And then there was what's on the inside. And the outside was in a far better place than the inside. And on the inside, I didn't even really know where to go and what to do. So discovering some of that help for the inside story, which I believe is a more important story, that's where I love to share that with people.
Awesome. The last word I'm going to throw at you on, and you probably know because it's on your website, but maybe not. People could throw website things at me that are on mine, and I go, I don't remember that. But, and this is a big part. You asked earlier on before we recorded, and we talked about it already a little bit. Who's listening today? Most of the people that are listening today are in a role of leadership at one point or another in their life, whether they're leading a Bible study group or leading a corporation or leading in their home or we're all in a leadership role. I teach a sports leadership program as well.
Yeah.
And leadership means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So it means enough to you that it's on your website. So when I say the word leadership, what comes to mind?
Yeah. The first phrase that came to mind was servant leadership. And, why do we have an opportunity to lead? It's to serve people and bring out the best in people. So I think 2 questions you can ask frequently is just, how are you doing? To the people around you, how are you doing? And then the second one is, what do you need? How can I help? How can I serve? And that empowers people. You're connecting with people and supporting people, and you care about people. I would say that my mind tends to go towards big picture and big vision. So those are good reminders for me to continue to ask those questions. But I think leadership, a lot of times for me, it's really taking a mountain and how are we going to do it? And I find great joy in the next mountain. And I think that when your purpose and your passion are connected, when what you care the most about is then something you're able to live out, and then you get to see lives changed. When you live in that kind of your divine design, wow, like you say, the money doesn't matter so much. Like, this is so good right here. And leadership has a high cost. You got to be willing to pay that price. There's no question, whether it's loneliness, sacrifice, the leaders got to set the example, and the leaders got to walk the walk and talk the talk. And that's something that's a responsibility. So you can't have just the benefits of leadership, but not, some of those responsibilities. And I just think you say yes to both. And I think there's a lot of people who are leading and they don't even realize it. Another word for leading is just influencing. And you're influencing your family, you're influencing your friends. With social media, you might have hundreds of people that one post you're influencing. So don't compartmentalize leadership and think, oh, I'm not a leader. You're leading, you're influencing. Now it's just, how are you going to do it? And I think you can't go wrong with servant leadership.
Absolutely. Ken Blanchard has a book, and I was looking for it. I turned over and looked. It's under the stack of books right here. It's servant leadership. If you don't have it, I'll send you a copy. It's the best.
Great.
You talked about a leader a moment ago in the interview when we were on the relationships discussion. You didn't tell us his name, and you don't need to tell us today if you don't want to. You talked about the old coach that you stay in touch with. Obviously a leader in your life. What is it about that coach that makes you want to stay in touch with him? Assuming it's a him.
Yeah.
And why would you consider him such a good leader?
Great question. Yeah, I'll share his name. It's Bobby Clark. He was my coach in college at Dartmouth, and he coached Stanford, Notre Dame, won a national championship. He was a professional player, played for Scotland, and coached the New Zealand national team. So just, you can Wikipedia find Bobby Clark. And, he created a culture. And I think that's what the best leaders do. They create a culture. And it was a culture where there was joy, there was honor. One of the phrases, he would, every day, it's a great day. It's a great day, lads, and every day was a great day to play soccer, to be together. Even if it was snowing in New Hampshire, it was a great day. And then he would also say, it's the wee things. It's the wee things. And he paid such close attention to doing the things right. When no one's looking, the little things, like, you do them right. And we had a culture that felt professional. It felt like family. And it felt like, how do we get all this for a college coach? And when you have a respect for the leader, and the leader's doing things right, and the leader sets that culture, like, you just want to stay in that. You want to keep that relationship going. And I believe soccer was just a platform for life. And coach was teaching us so many things about life. And I think that whether you run a family business, whether it's a podcast, whatever you're doing, that's just a platform for relationships, for growing, and for learning about life and setting the right culture. And that's what he did. And that's one reason why we stay in touch.
Yeah. Awesome. You just described my high school baseball coach, Gene Martin, to a T, except for the accent. Other than that,
right?
Yeah, he didn't have that I know of. But I could talk about Coach Martin all day long.
That's
and
right.
I do with a lot of people.
Yes.
What's the next big thing on your plate that you're looking forward to?
Well, one thing that we've got going is we've got about 100 churches in Seattle United, and that you'd think, and maybe some people are listening and church is the last place you even want to go. Maybe you had bad experiences, and those can run so deep, but it might sound simple to bring churches together and pastors together, but actually It's becoming better, but sadly, in a lot of places, it's competitive, it's weird, it's distant,
Yeah.
it's isolated, and I believe we need to unite.
Well,
I
I'll
think it's
interject just for a second too, and I see it today because there are churches that have been meeting in person, and churches that are still meeting outside, and churches not meeting at all within
yeah,
miles of each other where I live. And I
yeah,
attend one of those, and I'm going to tell you which one it is.
yep,
But I see it. I see that competitive may not be the right word. Maybe it is,
right.
but there's definitely conflict. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry,
Yeah,
Dave.
that's right. That's right. And so to come together and care for each other, like I just had a pastor text me and, we just gave them some chairs because they're a new church and they need some chairs. And he was asking, hey, do you think I could baptize someone at your church? It's like, okay, let's talk about that. Just that spirit of collaboration
Right.
that in all fields is so important. And then also with the digital, we're seeing so many things open up. And it used to be that I would just mainly be talking to the people in the room, but now there's people from all nations. And I'm building relationships with people in India and Pakistan and many countries and being able to connect with them online. It's incredible right now. And so trying to step into that realm. And of course, in person's the best. But people are on their phones. That's where they are. And if you're going to people, and now the world is more connected than ever before, and that's amazing. So I'd say enjoying people from other cultures, nations, backgrounds, different beliefs, those relationships are special. And I'm seeing unity in our city, and I'm seeing also a strong connection even globally right now. And I want to just keep going that direction. I don't know what it looks like. I'm learning a lot, kind of learning and leading, but we're seeing some incredible things happen.
What did you see in Seattle during all this this turmoil that we had during the election and so forth? I know that
Yeah.
the news wants us to think that the whole city's on fire, and it's not.
Right.
I have
Right.
I have nephews in Portland who never saw any of the stuff that we were seeing on the 6 o'clock news every night.
Yeah.
What's your perspective of what you saw?
Yeah. I would say overall, probably tension is a word that comes to mind because I feel like people were more outspoken than maybe they usually are. So maybe on social media, they're sharing very strong opinions. I think when there's a time of a lot of loss and trauma, and there's a lot of things changing, and people's lifestyles aren't what they want it to be, whether that's should we reopen, how quickly, should we wear masks, should we not wear masks, who did you vote for? You name the topic, and it seemed like before COVID, I didn't know where some people stood. And then during COVID,
Yeah,
it
we
felt
know where
like
everybody stands.
everyone is sharing. And it's like, okay, you just kind of want to put out some of those fires, especially on social media with comments. So I felt like there was more tension, but at the same time, I also saw what I would say is like maybe even like a coming together in a really positive way. For example, my neighbors, with all of us being at home, we got to know our neighbors and so many deeper friendships, new friendships. And there's just a real sense of community in our neighborhood. I mean, there's a group of about 20 kids. Now they play outside, and during COVID, we couldn't go into each other's homes. And, it's a different way to play together. But these 20 kids, like their friendships are amazing, and parents too. And so I'd say overall tension, tricky, navigating through some things.
Sure.
But then in terms of different pockets, just a great sense of community has been forming and strengthening.
That's my favorite word. Well, relationships and community are my two favorites, and I love breaking words up into what they mean. Common unity, community. We have
Yes.
something in common, so we should unify. Our
Nice.
neighbors are all home. We're all in this together, but we're going through it differently. We all hear different phrases and so forth. So yeah, for me personally, I've gotten to know my neighbor. I live in a cul-de-sac of 12 houses, and I haven't gotten to know them all, but gotten to know some of them a lot better because of the fact that most of us are home.
Yeah. Feels good.
It does. It does. I'm looking. I told you I wasn't going to look at my notes much. I have 4 questions left, and I know the last 2 are going to stay the last 2. The next 2, I'm trying to figure out which order I'm going to go in. So I'll just say, just something unique about you that maybe not very few, not the old, some tell me a deep dark secret type of question, but something unique about you or your heart or your background or something that maybe is lesser known to your community, using the word. Whether that's community is your home or your church or your neighborhood or what have you, something just kind of funny or whatever it is.
Right. I would say the thing that came to my mind, it was kind of unique and wasn't planning on saying it, but I didn't actually get my first car now I was starting to drive when I was 16. My parents had a car, but I didn't get my first car until late in my 20s. You say, well, what was going on there? And it was really a passion to not be in debt and to finish graduate school without any debt. And because of that, I worked part-time jobs. I tried to have a simplified budget. But even through our church, we've been able to, like, this isn't a commercial, but Financial Peace University, Dave Ramsey, we've been able to see so many couples take that class and financial health in the home. And that takes a lot of strain off marriages. And, being out of debt, there were things that I had some delayed gratification, but in the end, it was worth it. So that might be something that's not too obvious, but I love it when couples are able to step out of that burden of debt.
Hey, I'll tell you, I will do a commercial for Financial Peace University all day long. My wife and I took it at our church. We were a mess financially, and a lot of it was me because I'm a mess financially. I don't handle money very well. I don't, I'm the nerd. I'm not the, what are the two that they talk about? There's I can't pull the other one right now because I'm the nerd. I'm just in that, I'm the free spirit. I'm that free spirit. I'm the one that just wants to not so much spend, but I don't watch the dollars like I should. But since taking Financial Peace University, and here is my plug for it, unpaid, is that, and I love Dave Ramsey. I've got a lot of his books on the shelf behind me. Is that from there we did go to the cash system. We don't spend what we don't have, and for the first time in our 28-year marriage, we just bought a house. We got out of debt.
Nice.
And we're buying a house. Got our credit score way up. We got our debt pretty much gone, close to it. And we're buying a house. So
great.
And that's very much a plug for Financial Peace University, by the way.
There you go.
I have no problem at all giving love where love is due.
You got a sponsor for your podcast now.
There you go. Hey, Dave Ramsey, if you're listening, let's go, man. Let's talk.
That's right.
Love to get him as a guest. All right. So that was the what do you know? So here's an opportunity now. You're a pastor, and I hesitated whether I was going to have you do this, and I'm going to, because I think that this whole discussion has been really obvious what your faith is and why your faith's important to you and how it's changed and gotten you through some of those dark rooms that we've talked about earlier today. Open forum now for you to give a message to someone who's looking for some meaning in their life. Take it where you want to take it.
Yeah, Ed, I would say that a lot of people are hurting. A lot of people had bad experiences at church. Seattle's the second highest de-churched city in the country. And with those deep scars, there's a lot to overcome, and there's a lot of healing there. What I would say is that sometimes we have an image of God that isn't actually accurate, but it's been kind of warped and tainted by some different experiences that have been negative. And for me personally, in college, back at Dartmouth, there's something Jesus said. How can, what good is it if a man tries to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? And on the outside, I had all these different pieces that were successful, from friends to parties, relationships, to soccer and good grades, good school. I mean, just so many things. But on the inside, it just felt empty. And what I'd, put it together in one word, I'd say the word grace. And that's an undeserved gift that you don't try to earn or perform or achieve to a level where God is then going to love you, or if you're good enough, you make it to heaven. That's just not how it works. And grace is a gift. God's love, his presence is a gift. And there's no greater gift, I believe, than Jesus. Now, C.S. Lewis said something. He's either, because Jesus, among many people in history, have claimed to be the Messiah. Jim Jones was another one, as whacked as that was. But when someone makes that claim, they're either liar, lunatic, or Lord. And they can only be one of three things. And what I would encourage anyone listening to do is just check out the evidence. That's where my mind went. What's the evidence? Faith isn't blind. What's the evidence? There is a resurrection. Then what's the evidence? If there's no resurrection, then Christianity's junk. So I just started looking into the evidence, and with an open heart, open mind. It's still going to be a faith step, but kind of like a court case. Let's lay it all out. Let's look at it, and then let's make a decision. And if the most important things for eternity are tied to this decision, then it's worth some of my time and effort. And that's what I encourage anyone to do. And what I would say is that God is good, God loves you, and there's a relationship there. So that's probably, as most direct as you can have on your podcast, but you gave me a little freedom, and I'm just sharing from my heart.
Yeah. And for those who, I know a lot of you listening today, this is the furthest thing away from where you are today. And I get it. I totally get it. I've been there and I understand. And this isn't meant to push my beliefs or Jesse's beliefs on
That's
anybody.
right.
This is simply sharing what's in our heart. And that's the name of the podcast, From the Heart. Um, whatever inspires you. A lot of my friends say universe instead of God. A lot of my friends just talk about fate. And you know what?
Yeah.
And that's all great. Just recognize that there is a power out there that isn't you, that is the power that we need to be searching for in our lives, and to find that. And if you want to know more about that, you can reach out to me. I'm happy to share with you where I have gotten the belief system that I have. If you want to reach Jesse Bradley, Jesse, what's the best way for people to reach you today?
Yeah, I think going to the website, jessebradley.org, and then social media. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram.
Clubhouse.
And yeah, that's right. Clubhouse is great. You know, we need to connect, and it has conversations. It's a unique platform, but I love to respond to people. So any of these topics today, if you want to reach out, love to hear from you.
Well, stupid question. It's my final question. You knew it was coming because I'm thinking about changing my last question, because it seems like this question gets asked through the entire interview every time. But I'm going to ask it anyway as we wrap up today. And Jesse, thank you so much for taking time and for opening up your life to us and sharing your experiences and your lessons learned. And I think we're just scratching the tip of the iceberg, because I know you're a lot more than just what we've talked about in the last hour. And I hope that there will be a part two. But as we wrap up today, I'll just finish with my last question. Jesse Bradley, what's in your heart?
Thanks, Ed. I really enjoyed it. And I love that you're doing something that you enjoy so much, and that you're chasing after this podcast, learning and just letting people share what's in their heart too. What I would say is, for people who are listening today that are maybe, working so hard and persevering and just doing everything you can. When you run a business, there's so much pressure and you put in so many hours. And I guess what's on my heart and close is just don't let it consume you. Do what you need to do, but don't take for granted either the people around you, your family, in connecting and loving them. And don't let the business throw the relationships, the family off. Don't give the business too much power, but stay close to those people. And then also, I would say, the quality of our life is tied to the quality of our relationships. So enjoy those relationships. And there's a relationship with God that I think will surprise you in how much goodness and love there is. So enjoy those relationships. I'm a doer, so I'm speaking to doers, who like to take mountains, and just say, all right, slow down the relationships. Because at the end of our lives, I don't think there's too many people in their final year, their final breath, that are saying, I should have worked more. I should have done a few more tasks. But I can't tell you, how many people I talk to at the end of their lives saying, I should have connected more. So that's what's on my heart to close.
Oh,